Core premise: the Cadigal Compact ranks every species it meets on the Standard Development Index. Humanity failed to clear the threshold for formal contact,
The readings
so
are
instead
off
of a
the
treaty,
charts.
we received a training vessel,
We need a
the kind
diplomatic
used to teach
solution.
infantile species the
This is a
basics of
military
orbital
threat,
mechanics.
Mr. Prime
A
Minister.
hand-me-down for
Members
children.
of the Council.
Hidden value.
The Galactic
training
Alliance
vessels
seeks to ensure
simplified,
peace in
instruments
this
are
region.
calibrated against the
We must
Compact's
address
actual
the
measurement
recent
archive.
violations.
The full technical answer key behind 10,000 years of ranking civilizations, including exactly how the Compact's own ships are built to perform on it. Protagonist, Dr. Alina Voss, metrologist, spent 14 years arguing Earth's physical constants were measured with instruments too crude to trust. Antagonist, cultural attaché Say-Lauren of the Cadigal Compact, endlessly courteous, endlessly certain humanity would be grateful. Discovery team, Dr. Amara Bonsu Materials, Dr. Jinwoo Park Propulsion, Dr. Priya Naidu Sensor and Targeting Systems. The ticking clock. The Compact detects unauthorized study beyond tutelage parameters and issues a 48-hour ultimatum to surrender the vessel. The battle asymmetry. Humanity uses the vessel's own pedagogical calibration arrays, designed to safely weaken a student's shields during training drills, to find the exact resonant frequency of Compact shielding. The resolution trade. Voss negotiates access to the actual development index archive, not to be ranked by it, but to see the ranking key of every species the Compact has ever measured. They did not come to invade. Invasion would have required them to think we were worth the fuel. They came to donate something. A ship, decommissioned, marked for disassembly, delivered to Earth orbit with the same tone a person uses when handing down a child's bicycle to a neighbor's kid who hasn't grown into it yet. The Compact does not conquer species it considers beneath conquest. It measures them. Somewhere in a Cadigal archive is a number for every technological civilization ever surveyed, a single value on something called the Standard Development Index. And on the day that number is calculated for a new species, that species either enters the galaxy or it doesn't. Humanity's number came back low enough that no ambassador was sent. A tutor was sent instead. The formal transmission arrived 11 days after the ship did, because the Compact does not rush apologies it does not think it owes. It was written the way old money writes checks it doesn't expect to be questioned. This vessel is transferred under the Juvenile Tutelage Accord, Article 4, Provision 12. It carries no treaty obligations, no defense guarantees, and no right of formal address. Its instruction sets are calibrated to threshold 0 comprehension. Use is permitted, understanding is not required. Nobody in the State Department could decide whether the last sentence was a mistranslation or the whole point. The physical evidence was worse than the words. Every external plate on the ship was banded in a flat construction site orange, the interspecies color for non-functional, handle with supervision. Stenciled beneath the bands, in a font some Compact designer had clearly chosen for maximum legibility to a species assumed to struggle with reading, was a serial number and a single line, decommissioned. Category, instructional surplus. Disposal authorized upon return. Attaché Say-Lauren delivered the accompanying broadcast in person, or as in person as a hologram gets. He was tall in the way that reads as considerate rather than imposing, dressed in soft gray that seemed to apologize for existing. And he spoke English without an accent, without a pause, without a single grammatical seam. The fluency of someone who had learned the language decades before the people he was speaking to were born, purely so they would never have to learn his. "We understand this may be difficult to receive," he said, smiling the way people smile at children who have just lost a game they didn't know they were playing. The index measures many things: energy density, information theory, social cohesion under scarcity. Humanity performs remarkably well in several categories. But formal contact requires clearing all thresholds simultaneously, and there are 3 you have not yet reached. In another few centuries, you might understand why that matters. He inclined his head, the gesture the Compact uses instead of an apology. Please treat the vessel gently. It has taught many young species their first lessons in flight. The room that received this broadcast, 11 government scientists, 2 generals, 1 exhausted translator, went silent in a way that had weight to it. It was the silence of an insult landing exactly where it was aimed. Dr. Alina Voss did not experience the silence as her colleagues did. She experienced it as a data point. Alina had spent 14 years telling anyone who would listen that Earth's most precise instruments were still too crude to trust, that half of physics, settled constants carried error bars nobody wanted to admit were there, because the tools that produced them had never been checked against anything better. She had been called meticulous by people who meant obstructive, and had been quietly excluded from 3 separate national metrology boards for insisting a supposedly finished measurement standard be redone. She had been right every single time a redo eventually happened, and she had never once been thanked for it. She watched the hologram of a smiling alien describe a training ship for children, and she said the only sentence in the room that mattered. I want to board it. I'm not interested in what they stripped out. I'm interested in what they left behind because they thought it was simple. The ship let them in without protest. Its access systems had been built for species without hands, without eyes, without shared assumptions about what a door should do, so its interior treated every visitor as a stranger by default, which meant, mercifully, that it treated humans exactly as well as it treated anyone else. Dr. Amara Bonsu went first, because materials people always go first. They need to know what they're standing on before anyone tells them what it does. Bonsu had spent 6 years defending a doctoral thesis that a certain class of crystalline alloy should theoretically be capable of self-repair at the molecular level, a claim 2 separate review boards had called thermodynamically impossible, in writing on the record. She ran a gloved hand along the interior corridor wall and she stopped walking. She stood very still for 11 full seconds before she said anything, which the recording crew later timed, because 11 seconds of a scientist standing still in front of a wall is not normal behavior, and everyone in the room noticed it happening. This lattice is organizing itself, she said finally. Not randomly, deliberately. It's semi-crystalline at ambient temperature and it's realigning around the microfractures from transit stress in real time without power routed to this section. She crouched, put 2 fingers flat against the surface and did not look up. This isn't hull plating, this is a wall that heals. And it's rated, I'm reading the substrate tags now, it's rated threshold 0. This is what they consider a wall too simple to be worth explaining. Dr. Jinwoo Park found the drive section 4 hours later. Park Doctor. Jinwoo Park, no relation to any other park, simply the most common surname in Korea attached to an entirely unhelpful coincidence. Had spent most of his career arguing that reaction mass was a solvable inefficiency, not a physical law. A position that had gotten him laughed out of 2 conferences before the age of 35. He did not stand still like Bonsu had. He sat down on the deck, directly on the floor of the drive compartment, because his legs had stopped working correctly and it seemed safer than falling. It's not burning anything, he said from the floor to no one in particular. There's no reaction mass signature. It's using the same field geometry we've been chasing for a torch drive, except it's... He stopped. He put both hands flat against the deck plating like he needed to confirm it was solid. We could build this. We could do that in less than a year if we started today, not the version that gets us to Mars in 9 months. The version that gets us there in 9 days. Dr. Priya Naidu, brought in from Targeting Systems Research after 2 peer-reviewed papers on adaptive weapons, arrays that the Air Force had quietly shelved as premature, found the vessel's targeting brain in a compartment the compact's manifest listed only as observation core, non-weaponized. She went quiet for almost a full minute before she spoke, and when she did, her voice had the flat calm of someone deliberately not showing how frightened she was by what she just understood. This isn't non-weaponized, she said. This is a targeting computer that's been told it isn't allowed to target anything. The restriction is a software flag, not a hardware limit, a permission limit. Whatever species built this ship gave it the full architecture for weapons-grade prediction and then just told it in code not to use it for students. She looked up. That's not a simplified system. That's a fully capable system wearing a leash. If we can find the leash, we can take it off. Each discovery implied the next one before anyone said so out loud. A wall that healed itself implied a hull that could survive things no human hull had ever survived. A drive with no reaction mass implied speeds no human engineer had dared to model. A weapons brain wearing a leash implied that whoever had trained young species across the galaxy had, without meaning to, handed humanity a curriculum built entirely out of technology thousands of years, past anything on Earth. Technology so far past it that the compact considered it too basic to bother locking down. It was Alina Voss, 4 days into the survey, who found the part none of them had been looking for. She had gone looking for a calibration log, the way a metrologist always goes looking for a calibration log, because she wanted to know what instrument the ship used to check its own instruments. What she found instead, buried under 3 layers of what the manifest called pedagogical reference material, was a single compressed archive with no access restriction at all. Because no one who built this ship had imagined a threshold 0 species capable of finding it, let alone reading it. It was the standard development index, all of it. Every category, every weighted threshold, every historical entry for every species the compact had ever measured, going back further than written human history, and buried inside it. Because the index measures technology and technology has to be verified against something, was the full calibration key for how compact ships were built to perform against every single one of those categories. Alina sat with that file open for a long time before she called anyone. They didn't just give us a ship, she said when she finally did. They gave us the answer key to their own test. And they left it in the one place they were certain we'd never think to look, a section for teaching children how to measure things. The compact found out on the 11th day, because the compact always finds out, eventually, and because a species that measures everything cannot resist checking on its own donations. The formal communication arrived with none of the earlier gentleness. It had clearly been drafted, redrafted, and approved by someone who had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of being devastating while remaining perfectly polite. Unauthorized extraction of tutelage archive contents constitutes a material breach of the Juvenile Tutelage Accord. This archive was never intended for study by a species below developmental threshold. You have accessed material you are not equipped to correctly interpret, and its unsupervised use presents a hazard to yourselves and others. The final line was the one that circulated afterward in every briefing room on Earth. You have 48 hours to surrender the vessel and all extracted material, intact, or corrective action will be taken. Alina read it twice, standing in the drive compartment with Park still cross-legged on the deck plating behind her, and she did not feel fear. She felt something closer to relief, the specific relief of someone who has just been told by the people who wronged her exactly how frightened they are. They're not accelerating because they think we're dangerous, she said. They're accelerating because they think we're dangerous soon and they'd rather stop us before soon arrives. She turned to the room. We don't have 48 hours to finish. We have 48 hours to finish the part that matters. The part that mattered was Nadu's leash, and the 48 hours became the fastest sustained engineering effort in the history of the species, though almost none of it looked like effort from the outside. It looked like Bonsu sleeping 4 hours a night in a chair beside a wall that was quietly repairing itself. It looked like Park running the same field geometry simulation 19 times because the 18th result had seemed too good to be real. It looked like Alina Voss alone at 3 a.m. On the second night, sitting on the floor of her apartment with the index archive open on 3 monitors, crying without quite noticing she was doing it, not from fear, but from the specific bone-deep exhaustion of 14 years of being told her instruments weren't good enough. Arriving all at once at the moment, she was handed better instruments than anyone on Earth had ever touched. Nobody filmed that part. It wasn't for the record, it was just true. By hour 44, Nadu had found the leash a permission architecture, not a hardware lock, exactly as she'd guessed, and had done more than remove it. She had gone through the calibration key Alina found, and identified something the compact clearly hadn't considered a risk worth guarding. The exact resonant frequency their training vessels used to safely weaken a student's shields during drill exercises. A frequency that, it turned out, every compact hull still shared, because nobody redesigns shielding physics every few centuries just to keep the frequency secret from children. It's not a weapon they gave us, Nadu said, showing the frequency profile to the room. It's a training tool. It was built to teach students how their shields fail safely in a classroom setting. Nobody ever thought to hide it, because nobody ever expected the student to point it at the teacher. The ultimatum expired at 600 Eastern. 3 compact vessels dropped out of transit 11 minutes later. In formation, the kind of formation built to look inevitable rather than aggressive, because the compact does not consider itself an aggressor. It considers itself a corrective force. The battle lasted 11 minutes and 40 seconds. 32 rail guns, retrofitted onto the training vessel's hull in the final 6 hours by Materials team running on stimulants and Bonsu's self-healing lattice, opened fire the instant the lead compact ship crossed a threshold Nadu had marked in advance. The first volley did not target hulls. It targeted the exact frequency band the calibration key had identified, tuned to the resonance the compact's own training doctrine used to weaken a shield without destroying it. Except this time, at full power, on a ship that had never expected to be taught its own lesson back. The lead ship's shields failed in 9 seconds, not because the humans had found something new, because they had found something old, something the compact had built and then forgotten to consider a secret, because nobody imagines a student memorizing the answer key. The second compact ship adapted in the way the compact always adapts, competently, immediately, exactly as well as 3,000 years of institutional experience should allow. It shifted its shield harmonics off the known frequency in 4 seconds flat, faster than the simulation models had predicted, and for a moment the room monitoring the battle from Earth went cold, because for 4 seconds it looked like competence might be enough. It wasn't enough, because Park's drive gave the training vessel an acceleration curve the compact's threat assessment had never modeled for a threshold 0 species, and the ship simply moved faster than the second vessel's revised firing solution could track. 31 of 32 rail guns found their mark on the second pass. The second ship went dark. The third ship retreated. It did not retreat because it was destroyed or because it calculated it would lose. It retreated because its captain, in the 11 seconds before disengaging, transmitted a single line on an open channel that nobody on Earth had asked for and everybody understood immediately. This was not supposed to be possible. Then it was gone, faster than pursuit could have caught it even with Park's drive, and nobody chased it, because the story was never about destroying the compact. It was about the compact learning it could no longer afford to guess wrong about who it was measuring. 11 minutes and 40 seconds, 2 ships disabled, 1 ship gone. No human casualties because a self-healing hull, it turned out, heals faster than most weapons can damage it. The official compact response arrived 9 hours later. And it was exactly what everyone expected: bureaucratically immaculate, procedurally correct, entirely beside the point. The Juvenile Tutelage Accord is hereby suspended pending review. The personal transmission from Sayloran arrived 11 minutes after that, unscheduled, unannounced, sent on a channel that wasn't part of any official protocol at all. He did not smile this time. There was a silence at the start of the recording, 4 full seconds of him simply looking at whatever camera was on his end, and when he spoke, the fluency was still there but something underneath it had changed. "I was wrong about the specific thing that mattered," he said. "I assumed a species below threshold would treat the archive as a curiosity. I did not account for a species that would treat it as a language to be learned overnight." He paused again. "It was audacious. I do not have a better word for it in your language or mine. I underestimated you in a way I have not underestimated anyone in 400 years of this work, and I wanted you to hear that from me directly and not from a committee." He did not apologize for the disposal markings, or the orange bands, or the sentence about understanding arriving in a few centuries. That wasn't the kind of thing the compact apologized for. But he said the one true thing that mattered, and then the transmission ended, and nobody on Earth ever heard from him again in an official capacity. Alina Voss was not in the room for the celebration that followed. She was 3 decks down, alone, going through the calibration archive again, because she had already started thinking about what came after the part everyone else was still celebrating. Dr. Sarah Chen, brought in from the State Department Science Liaison Office 2 days before the battle. The only person in the building who had spent as much time reading trade law as reading physics, found her there an hour later. "We won," Chen said. "We won a battle we were forced into," Alina said, not looking up. "That's not the same as winning the thing that actually matters." She turned the monitor around. "This archive has the index for every species the compact has ever measured, including their own baseline. Do you understand what that means? We're not asking to be ranked anymore. We already know how the test is built." Chen sat down across from her, already understanding where this was going, because Chen had spent her whole career waiting for exactly this kind of leverage. "We cracked the drive geometry ourselves in 18 months of theoretical work before any of this happened," Alina said. "With the calibration key, Park thinks we could have a working torch drive in 6. That's not a threat, that's a fact we can put on a negotiating table." She finally looked up. "I don't want a formal apology. I want the full archive, unredacted, as the price of giving back a training ship they marked for disposal anyway. Let them save face on the treaty. I don't care about the treaty, I care about the 6 months." Chen almost laughed and then didn't, because it wasn't really funny, it was just true, and true things don't always need laughing at. "You've been thinking about this since before the battle ended," she said. "I've been thinking about the next 18 months since month 2, Alina said, and turned back to the monitor. Already drafting the opening terms of a negotiation the compact did not yet know it was about to lose.